Commander Lee Dae-ho stood at the observation deck of New Seoul Station, watching cargo ships drift between the massive orbital platforms. The sight always calmed him. Human ships moved with purpose but never rushed. They shared space lanes with alien vessels from dozens of worlds, all following the same peaceful protocols that had kept the galaxy stable for over a century. "Sir, we have visitors," said Lieutenant Park Min-soo, approaching with a data pad. The Vorthak delegation arrived early. Lee Dae-ho nodded. The Vorthak were new to the Galactic Federation, having joined only 5 years ago. Their species looked like walking lizards with 4 arms and sharp teeth. They came from a hot world where everything fought for survival. Most humans found them unpleasant but tried to be polite. "Where are they meeting Captain Kim?" Lee asked. "Conference room 7. They seem different today, more aggressive in their body language." Lee Dae-ho had noticed this too. Lately, Vorthak representatives seemed less interested in trade talks and more focused on asking questions about human military capabilities. It made him uncomfortable, but Earth's diplomats said not to worry. The Vorthak were just curious about their new neighbors. Meanwhile, 3 systems away, Dr. Park So-jin carefully brushed dirt from an ancient stone tablet. She had been working on this dig for 6 months, uncovering ruins that were older than any known civilization. The planet was officially neutral territory, claimed by no one, which made it perfect for scientific research. "Professor, you need to see this," called her assistant, pointing to a wall covered in strange symbols. Park So-jin walked over and felt her breath catch. The wall contained writing in at least 20 different alien languages, some so old that only 3 people in the galaxy could read them. But the message, repeated over and over in each language, was clear enough once translated. "Never wake the sleeping ones. Never anger those who choose peace. When they rise, worlds burn." At the bottom, carved more recently, were symbols she recognized as Vorthak writing. Someone had added new text to the ancient warnings just months. Ago on the diplomatic vessel, Harmony's Edge, Captain Kim Taemin sat across from Ambassador Grixtal, trying to keep his face neutral. The Vorthak had been asking the same questions for 3 days now. How many ships did Earth have? How fast could they travel? What weapons did they carry? "I must ask again," Grixtal said, his 4 arms moving in what humans had learned meant impatience. "Your people seem weak. You avoid fights. You make compromises. How did such a soft species become so widespread in the galaxy?" Kim Taemin smiled politely. "We believe cooperation works better than conflict, Ambassador. When everyone benefits, everyone prospers." "But you have ships. Military ships. Where are they?" "Earth maintains a modest defense fleet, as do all Federation members. We also have merchant vessels that can be converted if needed. But we prefer trade to warfare." Grixtal's eyes narrowed. "Preference is not ability. Show me these ships." "I'm afraid that's not possible. Military specifications are classified." The Vorthak ambassador stood abruptly. "Then this meeting is over. My people will make their own decisions about humanity's true strength." After Grixtal left, Kim Taemin sent an encrypted message to Earth Command. Something was wrong. The Vorthak were pushing too hard, asking too many military questions. In his 20 years of diplomatic service, he had never seen anything like it. Back on New Seoul Station, Lee Dae-ho received Kim's message along with several others. Intelligence reports showed Vorthak fleets moving toward human space. Trade. Ships were asking unusual questions about colony defenses. Most disturbing of all, 3 other alien races had quietly formed new alliances with the Vorthak Collective. "Sir," Lieutenant Park said, returning with more data. "Admiral Choi wants to speak with you. Secure channel." Lee connected to Earth's Deep Space Command. Admiral Choi Yun-ji appeared on screen, her face serious. "Commander, we're seeing coordinated behavior from 4 alien races. The Vorthak, Keleth, Nexari, and Silthan have been holding secret meetings. Our sources suggest they're planning something." "What kind of something?" Lee asked. "Unknown. But they keep asking the same questions about our military capabilities. Central Command thinks they might be planning to test our resolve." Lee Dae-ho felt cold. Test us how? That's what worries me. These species don't understand human history. They see our peaceful behavior and think it means we're weak. They don't know what happens when humans are pushed too far. The Admiral's words carried weight that Lee understood. Every human military officer learned about the old days before Earth joined the Federation. Humanity had nearly destroyed itself in wars that made alien conflicts look like playground fights. Earth joined the galactic community specifically to avoid that kind of violence again. "What are your orders?" Lee asked. "Maintain current alert status. Keep watching. And Commander, if they do try something, remember your training. All of it." The connection ended, leaving Lee alone with his thoughts. He walked back to the observation deck and watched the peaceful traffic flowing between worlds. Human colonies stretched across 17 systems now, home to over 2 billion people. They had built something beautiful here, something worth protecting. Dr. Park So-jin sent her findings to the Federation Archaeological Council, but marked them urgent for human attention. The ancient warnings were too specific to ignore. Someone had tried to warn the galaxy about species that looked peaceful, but weren't. The newest edition in Vorthak writing was even more disturbing. It said simply, "We do not believe the warnings. We will test them ourselves." Captain Kim Tae-min filed his diplomatic reports and prepared for the worst. In his experience, when aliens started asking military questions and stopped caring about trade deals, violence usually followed. He ordered his ship's defensive systems, checked and sent coded warnings to other human diplomatic vessels. The next morning, every human colony received the same message from the Vorthak Collective. It was broadcast on all channels, impossible to ignore. "People of Earth," the message began, "your expansion into our galaxy ends now. You have 72 hours to abandon all colonies and return to your home world. If you refuse, the Terran Suppression Coalition will remove you by force. You are weak. You will not resist. This is your only warning." Lee Dae-ho read the message 3 times before it sank in. 2 billion human civilians were being told to abandon their homes or face extinction. The Vorthak had made the biggest mistake. In their species' history, they had forgotten the oldest rule in the galaxy: never anger humans. The countdown had begun. The first explosions lit up New Sol's morning sky like deadly fireworks. Lee Dae-ho was drinking coffee when the orbital defense platforms started screaming warnings. Vorthak ships had appeared without warning, dropping out of hyperspace in perfect attack formation. "All stations, this is not a drill," Lee shouted into his comm as he ran toward the command center. "We are under attack." The first wave of plasma fire struck the city's shield generators. Built for meteor protection and small accidents, they lasted exactly 4 minutes against military-grade weapons. Lee watched in horror as beams of superheated energy carved through buildings like a knife through paper. "Sir, we have reports from 5 colonies," Lieutenant Park said, his voice shaking. "They hit us everywhere at once." Lee pulled up the tactical display. New Seoul, New Busan, Harmony Station, Kepler Colony, and the mining world of Titan's Rest were all under attack. The Vorthak had brought massive fleets to each location. This wasn't a warning shot or a test. This was genocide. "Get me Admiral Choi," Lee ordered, "and start evacuation procedures, all civilians to the deep shelters," but there wasn't enough time. The second wave of Vorthak ships began dropping ground troops while continuing the orbital bombardment. Lee could see transport ships burning as they tried to escape the planet's gravity well. Too many were loaded with families who would never see space again. Dr. Park So-jin felt her research station shake apart around her. She had been reviewing the ancient warnings when the first missiles hit. Emergency lights flickered as atmosphere vented from dozens of hull breaches. The station's defensive systems had been designed to stop small meteors, not concentrated military fire. "Everyone to the escape pods!" she shouted. But half her team was already dead or missing. Chunks of metal flew past her head as she crawled toward the nearest pod bay. Behind her, 20 years of archaeological research disappeared in flames. She made it to an emergency pod just as the station's reactor went critical. The explosion threw her tiny vessel away from the destruction like a leaf in a hurricane. Through the small window, she watched her life's work become expanding gas and debris. The pod's communication system crackled with emergency broadcasts. New Busan was gone. 500,000 people dead in the first hour. The Vorthak had used planet cracker missiles on a civilian target. They weren't trying to conquer human space. They were trying to wipe humans from the galaxy entirely. Captain Kim Tae-min saw it all happen from his diplomatic ship. The Vorthak had invited him to observe their demonstration of power from a safe distance. Now he understood why. They wanted a human witness to carry the message back to Earth. "Captain," his communications officer said, "we're receiving surrender demands from the Coalition fleet." Kim stared at the tactical display. The Harmony's edge was surrounded by 40 Vorthak warships. His small diplomatic vessel had no weapons and no chance of escape. But he wasn't thinking about surrender. He was thinking about the children he had seen playing in New Seoul's parks just last month. "Send this message on all frequencies," Kim said quietly. "Record everything we're seeing. Make sure Earth knows exactly what happened here." The Vorthak commander appeared on screen, all 4 arms raised in victory. "Human captain, your people fought briefly, but died easily. Tell your leaders that resistance is pointless. Submit or join your dead colonies." Kim Tae-min looked directly into the alien's eyes. "You just made the worst mistake in galactic history." The Vorthak commander laughed. "Your threats are empty. We have seen your military strength. 12 patrol ships and some converted cargo vessels. We expected more from such a widespread species." "You haven't seen our military strength," Kim replied. "You've seen our police force." Back on New Seoul, Lee Dae-ho crawled through the rubble of his command center. Most of his staff was dead. Emergency power flickered on and off, but somehow the quantum communication array was still working. He could reach Earth. "Mayday, Mayday," he transmitted. "This is New Seoul Colony. We are under attack by massive Vorthak forces. Civilian casualties in the millions. Repeat, millions of civilians are dead. This is genocide." The response came immediately from Admiral Choi herself. "Commander Lee, this is Earth Command. We copy your transmission. Emergency protocols are now in effect. Admiral, they used planet crackers on New Busan. They're not trying to conquer us. They want us extinct." There was a long pause before Choi responded. When she spoke again, her voice was different, colder. "Commander, I'm authorizing Protocol 7. Do whatever is necessary to protect remaining civilians. Use any methods available." Lee. Daeho felt something change in his chest. Protocol 7 meant no rules, no limits, no mercy. It meant humanity was dropping the mask of civilization and remembering what it used to be. "Understood, Admiral. What about the Federation Council?" "The Federation Council has declared this an internal matter. No species will intervene." That was the final betrayal. For 150 years, humans had helped keep galactic peace. They had mediated disputes, shared technology, and protected weaker species from aggressive neighbors. Now, when human children were being burned alive from orbit, the Federation was looking the other way. "All units," Lee broadcast to every human ship and station in range. "This is Commander Lee Daeho of New Sol Colony. We are abandoning all Federation protocols. Rules of engagement are now void. Take whatever action you deem necessary." The change was immediate. Human merchant ships that had been fleeing suddenly turned around and began suicide runs against Vorthak vessels. Cargo haulers rammed destroyers. Transport ships loaded with civilians became guided missiles aimed at enemy command ships. Dr. Park So-jin's escape pod was picked up by a human cargo vessel called the Lucky Strike. The ship's captain, a grizzled trader named Han Woo-jin, helped her aboard and showed her what was happening across human space. "They hit everywhere at once," Han said grimly. "But they made one mistake. They let some of us live." Through the ship's sensors, Park could see human vessels throughout the system changing course. Instead of running away, they were forming attack groups. Ship captains who had never fired a weapon in anger were preparing to ram alien warships with their bare hulls. "This is insane," Park whispered. "They'll all die." "Maybe," Han replied. "But they'll take Vorthax with them. And more importantly, they're buying time." "Time for what?" Han's smile was cold and terrible. "For Earth to remember what humans really are." The first human counterattack came at Titan's Rest. 17 merchant ships loaded with mining explosives flew directly into the Vorthak bombardment fleet. The explosions were visible from 3 systems away. When the light faded, 8 alien warships were gone, and the mining colony was free. Similar scenes played out across human space. Civilians armed with nothing but determination and improvised. Weapons began fighting back against professional soldiers. It should have been a massacre in the aliens' favor. Instead, it became a nightmare that Vorthak commanders couldn't understand. Humans didn't fight like other species. They didn't retreat when outnumbered. They didn't surrender when defeat was certain. They kept fighting until they won or died, and sometimes they kept fighting even after they died. Captain Kim Tae-min watched the battle reports flood in and saw something that made the Vorthak commander's confidence evaporate. Human losses were enormous, but so were alien casualties. More importantly, every human death was making the survivors more dangerous, not less. "Your people are insane," the Vorthak commander said, staring at the tactical displays. Kim smiled for the first time since the attacks began. "You haven't seen insane yet. Wait until our real military gets here." The alien looked confused. "These are not your military forces?" "These are our civilians." As if summoned by his words, new contacts appeared on the edge of the system. Ships unlike anything the Vorthak had seen before dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. They were sleek, deadly, and moving with purpose that made professional soldiers nervous. The Earth Defense Fleet had arrived, and they were very, very angry. Admiral Choi Eun-ji stood in the emergency command center deep beneath Seoul, watching screens filled with numbers that made her stomach turn. 2 million human civilians dead in 6 hours. Entire colonies wiped out by aliens who thought humans were weak. "Ma'am, the High Council is ready," her aide announced. The emergency session lasted exactly 7 minutes. Earth's leaders watched the footage from New Busan, saw the burning cities and dead children, and made the only decision they could. For the first time in 150 years, humanity would go to war. Authorization granted for all protocols, the council chairman said. "Admiral, you have complete authority. Use whatever methods necessary." Choi nodded grimly. "I'll need access to the reserve fleet." "Already granted. The keys are being transferred now." After the council ended their call, Choi walked to a vault that hadn't been opened since humanity joined the Federation. Inside were the command codes for ships that officially didn't exist. The reserve fleet had been built in secret over decades, hidden in asteroid fields and empty systems, waiting for the day Earth might need them. That day had come. Captain Yoon Jae-sung received his activation order while commanding a cargo hauler near Jupiter. The ship looked like an ordinary freight vessel, but under its fake hull lay enough firepower to level a small planet. All around the solar system, similar ships were revealing their true nature. "All stations, this is Admiral Choi," came the broadcast. "Operation Forgotten Fury is now active. All reserve fleet units, report status." Yoon's tactical display lit up with contact signatures as over 200 hidden warships declared themselves. Each one was equipped with weapons that violated multiple galactic treaties. Earth had signed those treaties in good faith, never intending to break them. But when enemies started killing children, treaties became meaningless paper. "Reserve Fleet Alpha, ready for departure," Yoon reported. "Beta Squadron, armed and ready. Gamma Wing, all systems green." Dr. Lim Min-ho had spent 20 years developing theoretical weapon systems that the Federation had banned. Planet crackers, gravity bombs, quantum disruptors, and things so terrible they didn't have names. His workshop beneath the Martian polar ice cap had been running non-stop since the Dia attacks began. "How long until the Nemesis units are ready?" Admiral Choi asked during their secure communication. 12 hours for the first batch," Lim replied, not looking up from his work. "But Admiral, these weapons, once we use them, there's no going back. The galaxy will know what humans are really capable of. The galaxy will learn to fear us," Choi said coldly. "That's the point." Meanwhile, in the ruins of New Seoul, Lee Dae-ho had discovered something that changed him forever. Hidden. In the colony's medical center were surveillance recordings from the first hour of attack. Vorthak soldiers had deliberately targeted schools and hospitals. They had shot children who tried to surrender. They had laughed while doing it. "Sir," Lieutenant Park said quietly, "Earth Command wants to know our status." Lee stared at the recordings for a long moment, then deleted them. Some things were too horrible to share even with his superiors, but he would never forget what he had seen. "Tell them we're operational," Lee said. "And Lieutenant, start training the civilian survivors for combat operations. Sir, these are farmers and shopkeepers. They're not soldiers. They are now." The first human counterattack came at Proxima Station, a Vorthak military base that controlled 3 star systems. Captain Yoon Jae-sung's task force dropped out of hyperspace without warning, their ships still disguised as merchant vessels. "Vorthak Command, this is the cargo ship Peaceful Trader requesting docking permission," Yoon transmitted calmly. "Permission. Granted, human vessel. Proceed to Dock 7. The station's commander probably thought he was about to capture some fleeing refugees. Instead, he watched his shields evaporate under weapons fire that should have been impossible for a cargo ship to carry. "What are you?" the Vorthak commander screamed over the communication channel. "We're the people whose children you murdered," Yoon replied, dropping his ship's disguise. The innocent-looking freighter transformed into a sleek destroyer bristling with weapons. Proxima Station lasted exactly 12 minutes. When the explosions ended, 50,000 Vorthak military personnel were dead, and the strategic base was expanding gas. No prisoners were taken, no mercy was shown. The message was broadcast across every galactic frequency. "This is Terra Command. We hold the Vorthak Collective responsible for genocide against human civilians. There will be no negotiation. There will be no surrender. There will be justice." The galaxy's reaction was immediate and terrified. Ancient species like the Eternal Keth began evacuating their border territories. Trade routes through human space were abandoned. Even aggressive species like the Keleth started recalling their forces from the front lines. Dr. Park So-Jin, now working from a refugee ship, managed to contact the Federation Archaeological Council with urgent information. The ancient warnings had been right. The text she had discovered wasn't about humans specifically, but about a pattern that repeated throughout galactic history. Every 10,000 years, a species emerges that appears peaceful, she explained to the terrified alien scientists. They integrate with galactic society, follow all the rules, share their knowledge freely. But when pushed beyond their breaking point, they become something far worse than any naturally aggressive race. "What happened to the previous species?" asked Dr. Vextar, the Council's senior archaeologist. "They destroyed themselves after eliminating their enemies. The galaxy had to evolve without them. But humans might be different. They've already shown they can control their violent nature. The question is whether they'll choose to do so again." Back in human space, the war was escalating rapidly. Colonel Park Hyun-sik led the first Terran Marine assault on a Vorthak colony world. His troops didn't bother with precision strikes or minimizing civilian casualties. They used the same tactics the aliens had used on human worlds. "Remember New Busan!" became the battle cry as human forces swept across enemy positions. Vorthak soldiers, trained from birth for warfare, broke and ran when faced with humans who fought like demons and showed no fear of death. The coalition leaders began to realize their mistake when casualty reports started flooding in. Human ships weren't just winning battles, they were ensuring no enemy vessel escaped to fight again. Human ground forces weren't taking prisoners. Human commanders weren't accepting surrender. "They're not fighting like a civilized species," complained Keleth Admiral Zex Thul during an emergency coalition meeting. "Because they're not civilized anymore," replied Vorthak General Grixmore. "We broke something when we attacked their colonies, something that kept their violent nature in check." Captain Kim Taemin, now commanding a captured Vorthak cruiser, received new orders from Earth Command. The diplomatic ship Harmony's Edge had been destroyed, but Kim had survived and taken control of enemy vessels through methods that would have been war crimes a week ago. "Captain, you're ordered to proceed to Vorthak space and begin Phase 2 operations," Admiral Choi transmitted. "What are Phase 2 operations?" Kim asked. "Psychological warfare. Make them understand what they've awakened." Kim smiled grimly and began broadcasting recordings of the New Busan massacre on all Vorthak communication frequencies. He added a simple message. "You did this to our children. Now we're coming for yours." The effect was immediate. Vorthak civilians began panicking and fleeing their homeworlds. Their military forces, already demoralized by human tactics, started deserting in massive numbers. The coalition government tried to maintain order, but couldn't explain how humans had hidden such devastating military power for over a century. Admiral Choi reviewed the tactical reports from her command center and felt a cold satisfaction. The reserve fleet was performing exactly as designed. Human forces were advancing on all fronts. Enemy casualties were climbing into the billions, while human losses had become surprisingly light once the real military engaged. But she also knew they were crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. The weapons Dr. Lim Min-ho had created were changing the fundamental balance of galactic power. The tactics her forces were using would be remembered for thousands of years. When this war ended, humans would never again be seen as peaceful neighbors. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender offers from the Silthan Republic and Nexari Empire. They want to withdraw from the coalition." "Denied," Choi replied without hesitation. "They participated in genocide. They'll face the consequences." The war was no longer about stopping the coalition or protecting human colonies. It had become about ensuring that no species would ever again make the mistake of targeting human civilians. The galaxy needed to learn that there were consequences for breaking the oldest rule, even if those consequences terrified everyone, including the humans who delivered them. Admiral Choi Yoon-ji stood before the largest holographic display ever constructed, showing the entire galaxy divided into sectors of red and blue. Red marked enemy territory. Blue showed human-controlled space. In the past month, the blue zones had tripled in size. "Protocol Omega is now active," she announced to her fleet commanders. "We are no longer fighting to defend our colonies. We are fighting to ensure this never happens again." Protocol Omega was humanity's total war doctrine, developed centuries ago but never used. It meant the complete destruction of enemy military capabilities, the occupation of enemy worlds, and the permanent restructuring of galactic power. It meant humans would never again have to trust other species for their safety. Colonel Park Hyun-sik received his new orders while standing in the ruins of a Kelith military base. His Terran Marine Corps had just finished the bloodiest ground campaign in galactic history, and they were only getting started. "Sir, Earth Command wants us to advance on the Kelith homeworld," his aide reported. Park looked at his troops. A month ago, they had been peacekeepers and colonial guards. Now they moved like professional killers, their armor decorated with alien symbols that meant death in 17 different languages. "How many civilians on the homeworld?" Park asked. 12 billion, sir." Park nodded grimly. "Tell them they have 48 hours to surrender unconditionally. After that, we treat it as a military target." The threat wasn't empty. Human forces had already demonstrated their willingness to use planet cracker weapons when enemies refused to yield. 3 Vorthak worlds had been reduced to asteroid fields in the past week. The galaxy was learning that humans kept their promises, especially the terrible ones. Dr. Lim Min-ho worked frantically in his weapons laboratory, trying to stay ahead of the military's demands. His Nemesis-class destroyers were already hunting coalition fleets across the galaxy, but Admiral Choi wanted something bigger. "Can you build it?" she asked during their secure communication. "A ship that size, it would be larger than most space stations. The weapons alone would violate every treaty humans have ever signed." "We didn't start this war," Choi replied coldly, "but we're going to finish it. Can you build it?" Lim stared at the plans for what would become the Terra's Wrath, a dreadnought that could destroy entire fleets single-handedly. "Give me 60 days. You have 30. Captain Yoon Jae-sung commanded one of the hunter-killer groups that were systematically eliminating coalition forces. His ships no longer bothered with traditional tactics. They simply appeared, destroyed everything in range, and moved to the next target. Contact ahead, his weapons officer reported. Vorthak cargo convoy with escort. Military escort? Yoon asked. 2 destroyers and a cruiser, sir. Eliminate them all. Sir, the cargo ships might be carrying civilians. Yoon turned to face his crew. These were people who had joined Earth's peaceful merchant fleet to explore the galaxy and make friends with alien species. Now they were implementing genocide with the efficiency of a factory assembly line. The Vorthak made their choice when they targeted our children, Yoon said quietly. Every ship, every station, every Vorthak in space is now a legitimate military target. The convoy lasted 6 minutes. No distress calls were answered. No survivors were rescued. Meanwhile, Lee Dae-ho had transformed from a colonial administrator into something that made veteran soldiers nervous. His resistance forces had evolved from desperate civilians into an organization that Vorthak commanders refused to discuss in official reports. General Lee, came the transmission from Earth Command. Yes, General. His promotion had come with authorization to use any methods necessary to protect human civilians. Earth Command, this is Dae-ho. Status report on pacification operations. Lee looked out at New Seoul, which was slowly being rebuilt by human refugees and Vorthak prisoners of war. The aliens worked 18-hour shifts with minimal food, building monuments to the children they had killed. It was systematic, efficient, and completely legal under the new occupation laws. Sector 7 is secure. Local Vorthak population is compliant. Casualties? Minimal human losses. Enemy casualties are no longer being counted. That was the new reality. Human casualties mattered. Enemy casualties were just numbers that affected strategic calculations. It was a fundamental shift in how humans viewed other species, and everyone in the galaxy could feel it happening. Dr. Park So-jin continued her research into ancient galactic warnings, but now her work had a different purpose. Instead of understanding the past, she was helping Earth Command plan for the future. The pattern is consistent, she reported to Admiral Choi. Every species that attempted genocide against a peaceful neighbor was completely eliminated. Not defeated, eliminated. Their languages forgotten, their planets resettled, their very existence erased from history. Are you suggesting we're following an inevitable pattern? Choi asked. I'm suggesting that peaceful species develop peaceful tendencies for a reason. When those tendencies are removed by external pressure, what remains is something far more dangerous than natural predators. Choi considered this. Human forces were already advancing beyond what was necessary for victory. They were pursuing what could only be called extermination. Coalition species weren't just losing the war. They were facing extinction. Is this what we've become? Choi wondered aloud. No, Park replied. This is what we always were. We just chose to be something else for a while. The psychological warfare campaign reached new heights when Captain Kim Tae-min began broadcasting from Vorthak space itself. He had captured an entire star system and was using it as a base for operations that spread terror throughout coalition territory. Citizens of the galaxy, his message began, you are witnessing the consequences of breaking the oldest rule. You were warned not to anger humans. You chose to ignore those warnings. Now you will live with the results. The broadcasts showed footage of human military operations, planets being cracked like eggs, fleets disappearing in balls of superheated plasma. cities being systematically dismantled by humans who worked with the methodical precision of natural disasters. This is not revenge, Kim continued. Revenge implies emotion. This is simply cause and effect. You caused harm to human civilians. The effect is your complete elimination as a threat. Coalition morale collapsed entirely. Sylvan Republic forces surrendered by the millions rather than face human assault troops. Nexari Empire worlds declared independence and begged for human protection from their own government. Even Keleth Dominion citizens began welcoming human occupation forces as liberators from their own military leadership. The Vorthak Collective, meanwhile, faced complete internal collapse. Their government fell when General Grixmore shot Ambassador Grixtal during a strategy meeting, screaming that the diplomat had doomed their entire species with his arrogance. "We should have listened to the warnings," Grixmore transmitted to Admiral Choi in what amounted to an unofficial surrender. "Our ancestors knew better than to wake sleeping monsters." But surrender was no longer an option. Human forces had momentum now, and they weren't stopping until every threat was permanently eliminated. The Terra's wrath emerged from Dr. Lim's. Shipyards ahead of schedule, a vessel so massive that planets changed their orbital patterns when it passed nearby. Captain Yoon Jae-sung was promoted to command the dreadnought, leading a fleet of 500 ships toward the Vorthak homeworld. The final battle of the war would not be a battle at all. It would be a demonstration of what happened when humans decided that a species was too dangerous to exist. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving millions of surrender transmissions from the Vorthak homeworld." "Acknowledged," Yoon replied. "Continue approach. Target all military installations, government buildings, and industrial centers." "Sir, that's essentially the entire planet." Yoon looked at the tactical display showing a world of 8 billion Vorthak civilians who had supported their government's decision to exterminate human children. "I know." The galaxy watched in horrified silence as human forces prepared to end the war in the most final way possible. Ancient species that remembered the last time this happened began evacuating entire sectors of space. Even species that had never interacted with humans started building stronger defenses, because everyone now understood the truth that had been written in stone by civilizations long dead. There are species in the galaxy that choose peace not because they are weak, but because they know what they become when that peace is broken, and once broken, it might never be repaired. The Vorthak homeworld filled the view screen of the Terra's wrath, a blue-green planet that looked almost like Earth from a distance. Admiral Choi Yoon-ji stood beside Captain Yoon Jae-sung on the bridge of humanity's most powerful warship, watching 500 human vessels take positions around the world where their enemies had been born. "Final surrender offer incoming," the communications officer reported. "Put it through," Choi ordered. The image that appeared showed the Vorthak High Command in complete collapse. General Grixmore knelt before the camera, all 4 arms spread, in the traditional gesture of absolute submission. "Humans of Terra," he began, his voice broken, "we surrender unconditionally. We offer our worlds, our fleets, our lives. We beg only that you spare our civilians who played no part in the attacks on your colonies." Choi studied the alien general who had once commanded the largest military force in this sector. Now he looked like a broken creature begging for mercy from the monsters his people had awakened. "Your surrender is noted," she replied coldly. "But surrender was an option you could have chosen before you murdered our children. That time has passed." General Lee Dae-ho watched the transmission from the surface of New Seoul, which had been rebuilt with Vorthak labor into a memorial for the dead. 2 million human names were carved into walls of black stone, each one representing a life cut short by alien arrogance. "Sir," Lieutenant Park said quietly, "the orbital bombardment is about to begin." Lee nodded. He had become something terrible during this war, something his peacetime self would have been horrified to meet. But as he looked at the memorial walls, he felt no regret. The galaxy needed to learn that some lines could never be crossed. "Proceed with the operation," he ordered. Above the Vorthak homeworld, Captain Yoon gave the command that would end the war forever. "All ships, commence planetary bombardment. Primary targets are government centers, military installations, and industrial complexes. Secondary targets are population centers exceeding 1 million inhabitants." The first wave of plasma beams lit up the planet's atmosphere like a second sunrise. Cities that had stood for thousands of years vanished in seconds. Spaceports became craters. Government buildings became glass. But this wasn't random destruction. Human forces targeted their strikes with surgical precision, eliminating the Vorthak capacity for future warfare while leaving enough infrastructure for survivors to rebuild a peaceful society. It was genocide with a purpose, ensuring that Vorthak aggression would never again threaten human civilians. Dr. Lim Min-ho monitored the bombardment from his command ship, watching weapons he had designed reshape an entire world. The planet crackers remained unused. This wasn't about destroying worlds anymore. It was about creating a future where such weapons would never be necessary. "Admiral," he transmitted to Choi, "we're receiving surrender offers from the last coalition holdouts. The Kelith Dominion is offering complete submission. The Nexari Empire has already begun implementing human oversight protocols." "Too late," Choi replied. "They had their chance to surrender honorably. Now they'll surrender on our terms." Those terms were simple and absolute. All coalition military forces would be disbanded. All coalition worlds would accept human oversight for a period of 1,000 years. All coalition species would dedicate 20% of their resources to rebuilding human colonies. And most importantly, all coalition children would learn human history, including detailed accounts of what happened when humans were pushed too far. The bombardment lasted exactly 6 hours. When it ended, the Vorthak homeworld still existed, but the civilization that had produced it was gone forever. 8 billion aliens now lived under human occupation, their every action monitored by the species they had tried to exterminate. Captain Kim Tae-min accepted the formal surrender of the Vorthak Collective in a ceremony broadcast across the galaxy. The once proud aliens prostrated themselves before a human diplomat, signing documents that effectively ended their existence as an independent species. "By this treaty," Kim announced, "the Vorthak Collective ceases to exist as a political entity. All former Vorthak territories are now protectorates of the Human Colonial Federation. All former Vorthak citizens are now subjects of human law." Dr. Park Sojin found herself appointed as the first director of Galactic Historical Preservation, tasked with ensuring that the lessons of this war would never be forgotten. Her first act was to establish monuments on every inhabited world, inscribed with the same message in every known language. Here lies the Vorthak Collective, Kelith Dominion, Nexari Empire, and Silthan Republic. They broke the oldest rule in the galaxy: never anger humans. Let their fate serve as a warning to all who would harm the innocent. But the transformation of human society was perhaps the most profound change of all. Admiral Choi found herself appointed as the first Supreme Galactic Marshal, commanding forces that now included the combined fleets of 6 species. Earth's merchant ships carried weapons that could destroy battle cruisers. Human colonies were protected by defense networks that could sterilize entire star systems. "We've become what we swore never to become," General Lee said during a private conversation with Choi. He had retired to New Seoul but remained haunted by the things he had done during the war. "We became what we needed to become," Choi replied. "The galaxy forced this choice on us. We could either remain victims or become something that ensures there are no more victims." The new galactic order was built on a foundation of controlled fear. Trade flourished because human ships guaranteed safe passage. Wars ended because human arbitrators backed their decisions with planet-killing weapons. Exploration expanded because human escorts made even the most dangerous regions safe for civilian vessels. Other species adapted to the new reality in different ways. The ancient eternal Keth emerged from isolation to share their own history of awakening sleeping powers, helping younger species understand the patterns that govern galactic civilization. Peaceful species like the Benthic Collective found themselves under human protection, their worlds guaranteed safe from aggressive neighbors. Even former enemies discovered unexpected benefits. Vorthak civilians, freed from their militaristic government, began developing art and science for the first time in their species' history. Kelith merchants, no longer forced to support massive military spending, found their economy booming under human trade agreements. Captain Yoon Jae-sung, now Fleet Admiral of the Terran Deep Space Command, patrolled the galaxy in ships that needed no weapons because everyone knew what humans were capable of. Peace was maintained not through diplomacy or mutual understanding, but through the absolute certainty that breaking it would result in extinction. "Is this what victory looks like?" his aide asked during a routine patrol near the former coalition territories. Yoon looked out at ships from dozens of species traveling safely through space that had once been a war zone. "Victory isn't the right word," he said. "This is what happens when a peaceful species is forced to abandon peace. We didn't win this war. We ended the possibility of future wars." Dr. Park So-jin's research revealed the full pattern that had been hidden in ancient warnings. Every 10,000 years, galactic civilization reached a crisis point where aggressive species began targeting peaceful ones. The peaceful species then faced a choice: accept extinction or abandon the restraints that made them peaceful in the first place. "The humans weren't unique," she wrote in her final report. "They were simply the latest iteration of a cycle that has repeated throughout galactic history. The difference is that previous species destroyed themselves after eliminating their enemies. Humans found a way to maintain both their capacity for violence and their preference for peace. The galaxy's new constitution included one law that superseded all others. No species shall deliberately target civilians of any member race. The penalty for violation was simple: judgment by the Terrans. In schools across thousands of worlds, alien children learned the same lesson. There are species in the galaxy that choose peace not because they must, but because they understand the consequences of choosing otherwise. These species should be respected, protected, and above all, never threatened. Because the oldest rule in the galaxy had been rewritten with human blood and alien ashes. Do not anger humans. They will not warn you twice. The war was over. The galaxy was at peace. And everyone knew exactly what the price of breaking that peace would be. Humanity had saved galactic civilization by demonstrating what happened when civilized behavior was abandoned. It was a lesson written in the ruins of 4 interstellar empires, taught in the ashes of 1,000 worlds, and remembered in the nightmares of survivors who had witnessed what sleeping giants looked like when they woke up angry. The humans had kept their word. There would be no more wars like this one, because there was no one left who dared to start them.